think we'll go ahead and get started then. So thank you for those of you joining us from Eventbrite. For those of you who don't know, we are Amala Vida. We are a life, health and wellness, leadership, and career coaching company. And my name is Justice. I'm a relationship strategist on the team. And what that means is when you schedule time to speak with us, generally speaking, you most likely will end up on my calendar. And we're going to use our half hour together to really do a deep dive into what your current situation is and as that pertains to your goals. I'm going to learn more about you. And then I'm going to make a recommendation of a coach or coaches on our team that I think is best suited to help you accomplish your goals, given their backgrounds, personalities, and skill sets. And so if anybody has some things already in mind that they might want to talk about, I'm going to go ahead and drop my link in there now. You can go ahead and follow that to my calendar. Slots are filling up really fast for the fall as people are realizing we're coming up on the end of the year. So feel free to jump in there sooner rather than later. But with that being said, we have the lovely Coach Cait with us here today, and I'm going to pass it off to you, Cait.
Thanks, Justice. I am Cait Swami. I support clients in the life, leadership, and career space here at Amala Vida, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic today. I want to kind of lead with a caveat, and I will mention this a couple of times. My technology will not allow for me to show my face and my slides at the same time. So I apologize in advance for the inconvenience. What I'm going to do is I will, where those breaks naturally happen, and if questions come up, I will turn off my slides and come back. So it might be a little bit glitchy, but I just kind of throw that out there and ask, thank you in advance for your grace and the technology that sometimes doesn't do what we want it to do. Without further ado, though, I'm very excited to be talking about this topic today. So the research shows that individuals who have what we call a fixed mindset actually fail to ever reach their full potential. So the question then becomes, does what we believe about ourselves have the ability to impact our success or our failure, right? And so the short answer to this is yes. That if you want to be happier and more successful in life, it is important to fight the brain's natural tendency to focus on the negative. The good news, though, is that it's much easier to change your mindset than you may think. And it really starts with having this awareness, identifying what these common mindset traps are that we all fall into. And then by doing so, we can really illuminate and unleash that spark for positive growth, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I will say just a little bit about my coaching style. I definitely lead with empathy, but I feel like information is power. So I love providing the research and the science behind all of this stuff. So you'll notice in my presentation today, it's very data heavy. But I'm also big about providing tools, right? So I'm hoping that you can all walk away with some, at least a starting point of something to go from when you find yourself in these mindset traps. So before I go over to the presentation, what I would love to call everyone to do is to take out a piece of paper from their notebook. And you don't have to write on it quite yet, but I want you to bring to mind a recent setback or failure or obstacle that you've experienced. It could be something difficult at work, something that kind of got in the way of you achieving a goal that you had for yourself. A common one I find is maybe a disappointment, a rejection from a job or something like that. It could be a difficult relationship dynamic, just something, the things in work that kind of make us feel a little bit of discomfort and in life that just bring that discomfort. I want to caveat this that I am not talking about setbacks in the form of suffering and grief and trauma and just like the really icky nasties that happen in our lives. I'm talking just about those bumps, right, along the road that kind of make us feel, discomfort, for lack of a better word. So bring to mind what that example might be. We all face them, and something recent, right? Like you could be going through it right now. You could be having experienced it this week, or maybe in the past couple of weeks. And I did see a note that you can't write in the chat. That is no problem. You can definitely just, bring to mind that this is just an exercise for you, and you can certainly go back and watch that. So thank you for bringing that up. Without further ado, I'm going to share my presentation. And as I mentioned before, I will go away, but I will pop back in kind of throughout the presentation. And then towards at the end, we will have time for questions. Justice, feel free to kind of chime in if I'm talking too much and there's a question that needs to be addressed. That way we can kind of have this be a really great dialogue. So without further ado, let me, hold on a second. I'm gonna go share content screen. Okay. Can everyone, Justice, can you see our screen?
Yes, I can.
Fabulous. Okay. So, as Justice mentioned, we are Amala Vida. We are a coaching company that supports people in all aspects of their lives, whether that be through career, leadership, health and wellness, or just general life coaching. Ultimately, the mission of our service is to help our clients throughout the world find meaningful work and ultimately love their lives, which is the meaning of Amala Vida. I am Cait Swami, as I mentioned before. A little bit about me. I started my career actually in corporate finance. I thought that that was the work that I wanted to do when I came out of college, and I quickly discovered that my innate talents were much better served in, sorry, I don't know how to turn those notifications off, so I apologize if that's distracting. I quickly realized that, my talents were not served in the finance space. And so I made a pivot into HR, where I spent about a decade of my career in leadership development, primarily leading global talent programs at a major Fortune 50 company. And through that experience, what I found is that I was naturally drawn to coaching, and I loved the one-on-one aspect and watching the growth in people through general conversations and getting curious about them. I describe myself as someone who is a people enthusiast. I am definitely a lifelong learner. A little bit about me personally: I'm a mother, I'm a wife. I'm a very loyal and optimistic person. I drive, my core value is connection, and really that is kind of how I found my way to coaching. So would love to connect with you after this presentation. So again, bring to mind that setback that we talked about. But I just want to kind of tell you like a little bit of norms. I know I sort of touched on this. Feel free to leverage the chat throughout this. Justice will be monitoring that. Raise your hand with the little hand sign on Zoom. And just have something to write on if you're not, if you're able to, and a piece of paper in front of you. So today we're going to talk about what mindset is and why it matters. I'm going to be discussing some common mindset traps. There are so many mindset traps, I will say. So I'm going to be focusing on just 5, but that does not mean that this is, these are the only mindset traps that people find themselves in. It's just about what time we have for today to discuss this, right? Like I mentioned before, I'm big on data, so I'm going to give you some science behind mindset shifts and what that looks like. And then I'm going to offer you some practical tips on how to change your mindset when you find yourself caught in those traps. I'll hand it over to Justice. We'll be talking a little bit about Amala Vida and what we can offer you in terms of our services. And then we'll end with a Q&A. Okay, so what I would love you all to do is to think of that recent setback you had, right? And what I mean by this is, again, not something that is, very traumatic or, a severe, like a loss of a loved one, right? Like these are the bumps in the road. These are the curveballs that life throws us all the time, every single day. Obstacles, maybe things that have gotten in the way of us achieving our goals. And if you feel compelled to share in the chat, how did it make you feel and what did you tell yourself in that moment? What was kind of your initial reaction? Potentially, did it change at all over time as you kind of stepped away from it? But really, like, what did you tell yourself? What were the stories that you told yourself? So I'm going to give everyone just about a minute to do just this exercise. And kind of as I set that timer, I'm going to give everyone some silence, which is hard for me as an extrovert. So with that, I'm just going to stop talking and give you space. Okay. Justice, do we have any comments in the chat at this point? I know that this can be kind of a hard one and it sort of requires some vulnerability. So if not, that's totally fine. But any thoughts that are coming through?
We do. We have one. It says disappointment
Okay.
and we have a couple. Disappointment and negative talk about lack of preparedness. Would have done this, should have done that. Someone else would have done better.
Yes. Yes. Oh my
And then
gosh.
we have another one that says fear of failure, rejection, believe no one believes in my abilities. When I was young, I was always able to sort what I was capable of. Mine has truly believed that over the years.
Yeah. Definitely how we experience failure as a child informs, who we are today. And I'm going to be getting into a little bit of that. I'm going to be touching on that a little bit indirectly. Gosh, and this idea of, I should have done this better, right? This is a word that comes up a lot with my coaching clients. I'm not saying that word doesn't need to be part of our vocabulary, but when we talk about ourselves, what would it look like to maybe change that to what could I have done or what would I do in the future? That might be something that is helpful for you as you think about reframing. Certainly I heard the comment around the fear of failure. That is so common. We're also going to be talking about that today, right? It's fear, and the fear of failure can really, really impact our ability to really take charge and see what our goals are, and can get in our way often, right? And that doesn't mean that fear isn't sound, right? Like those voices are there to keep us safe. And at the same time, right, it can get it can get in our way and it can impact our lives negatively. Anything else there, Justice?
Yes, we have robbed of self-worth, interview rejections 5 times, felt I'm not good enough, felt no point to keep on trying, and not good enough again. Gaslighted by manager, completed tasks and projects on time, ahead of schedule, and told good job, but should have done less differently.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Gosh, I so feel that the personal rejection, like the rejection with the jobs, I brought that up as a recent setback because I so feel that in my bones personally, right? Like that is real, right? And it's very hard to experience that and then not measure your self-worth against that, right? whoever who's talking, like, I, invite you to, if you aren't coaching already with us, certainly, would love to pick up a conversation with you around that. There are definitely some strategies we can talk through in how to overcome that, right? And sometimes it's around, maybe it's not your resume, right? It actually is rewriting that story for you. So we'd love to get curious about that with you. That one about feeling like you're being gaslighted by your manager. Gosh, certainly that, this idea is very common right now. And it's, this idea of kind of toxic leadership. I'm also a leadership coach, and this comes up a lot, and it's very easy to feel like you are being gaslit, right? And you're only focused on what you're doing, what you're not doing right. And that's what the feedback is. So yes, very easy to turn that type of feedback into the way that you measure your self-worth. So with that, I'm going to continue to go just for the sake of time, but these are really, really great examples. And I think that these are excellent ones. We're going to be circling back to this throughout the discussion today. But again, Justice, if there are other things that are coming through the chat, like, feel free to kind of just chime in. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we're going to get into, what is mindset and why does it matter? Mindset is defined simply as a set of beliefs that shape how we make sense of the world, right? I have that little math problem there. How we feel and how we think is how we respond, right? Our mindset ultimately it does drive how we behave and respond to certain circumstances and situations. But the real test of our mindset is actually how we respond to and cope with life's challenges, like the ones we were talking about before. Going back to that mindset, that kind of that moment that we were talking about before, that setback. How did you feel? What were the stories that you told yourself, right? While it's very easy to be positive when life's going as planned and things are good, the true test, again, really is like when things are not going as planned or expected. So the question really around this becomes, are you going to be the person who gives up, or are you going to choose to learn and grow from the setbacks that life throws your way? Okay, so this idea of a new mindset equals new results, right? As a leadership, life, and career coach, I'm a firm believer that success and happiness is rooted in our mindset, right? We cannot have one without the other. In order to achieve our goals or your goals, your mindset must align with your aspirations. So what I have found is that the most successful clients that I have these big dreams, right? But they also recognize what their blind spots are, and they're able to see or be challenged in a way that I can highlight that mindset for them, and they're able to shift and kind of highlight that spark, right? Or that magic that happens when mindset shifts occur in order to achieve the transformation and reach the goals that they want. The first step here is just really identifying which trap you commonly fall into. And as I mentioned before, while there are a number of them, I mean, you could spend honestly all day on the internet looking at all of the different mindsets. I'm just going to focus on 5 today. And these are ones that show up consistently with my clients, regardless of the aspect of coaching that we're talking about. And yeah, so we're going to talk about what that is. And again, I'm going to continue to challenge you to look at these mistakes, setbacks, the bumps along the road as actually opportunities, right? To learn, grow, and be better. You look at some of the most successful entrepreneurs, visionaries, just individuals in this world, right? They have the ability to recognize that they've failed, and we will all fail again. But what do we learn? How do we grow from that? Okay, so common mindset traps. So I am going to just be talking about what these are at this point. And as we go throughout this presentation, I am going to give you some tactical tips and tools that you can use when you find yourself in that. So the first step, like I mentioned before, is just recognizing what they are. So the first one, which is pretty common, I would assume many of you have heard about this. It's this idea of a fixed versus growth mindset. A fixed mindset is really described as a mindset that is constrained with little room to expand. It's kind of that like feeling of, not really wanting to step out of your comfort zone. There's discomfort there. Anything that you want to accomplish is framed by what you already know. There can be some judgment there about yourself. Maybe there's some fear of failure that's, like I mentioned before, that isn't always a bad thing, but it's actually getting in your way of accomplishing your goals. On the other side of that is this idea of the growth mindset, right? Which is all about seeing potential. We can always learn more, grow more, be better, even if we fail, right? And so I'm going to give you some tips, as I mentioned later, on how to kind of get yourself out of that fixed mindset and get into more of that space of growth. The second one that I want to talk about today is this idea of thinking versus doing. This one comes up a lot with my clients. It is probably very simple to describe, but it's really this idea of like the thinking mindset is considering all the steps that we need to do and take to achieve our goals. But what happens is it can be really paralyzing for people when we think about everything that we need to do. And then we end up not taking any action at all, right? Because your mind is in thinking mode, it can actually be really hard to figure out where to start. And then the doing mindset, which is the flip side of that, is really being clear about what you want, right? Setting a vision, setting a goal, and then making a plan about what it's going to take to get there, and then just taking that first step. I always remind my clients that the distance between your goals and execution is the distance between your goals and actually the reality of having them is the execution of putting those goals into action, right? The third one, which is, to be completely honest, it is highly complex. We could do an entire workshop about scarcity versus abundance. There is, studies within, even just like, what your socioeconomics are and demographics here. So I'm not going to touch on too much of that right now, but just at a high level, what that means is scarcity mindset is really this fear, this kind of feeling of lacking, right? Or not having enough. It's often described in terms of resources or money. But it can also be described in like whatever field you're in, right? For example, coaching, right? That's like such a great example of the industry that is very saturated. And this idea that, there's just not enough to go around, right? Like it's, it can show up in that way. Like there's no room for me here, right? It can also be seen as a reluctance to share information too. But again, oftentimes seen in this idea of money and resources. On the flip side of that, the abundance mindset is this idea that's really expansive. It's this openness to share and collaborate, so not kind of like hoarding that information. It's about seeing resources as tools and not necessarily finite, right? And so, like I mentioned, there's layers to this that I'm not going to touch on right now, but think about this a little bit more. And if you're curious to, expand this conversation, certainly reach out to me. The fourth trap is the can't versus can mindset. Okay. So the can't mindset, it really refers simply to negative self-talk, right? Our brains are remarkable, right? For one, and I'm going to get into more of that. I'm going to touch on that, but believing that you can't do something, it trains your brain to believe that that is the truth. And what happens with this mindset is that it often results on you never taking any action on your goals, right? On the flip side of that, the can mindset may be a little bit corny and cliche, but there's truth here, right? Like whether you think you can or you can't, you are right. And so, very common here. And again, we'll talk about some tips with regard to that. The final one, which, my goodness, I certainly have a personal connection to, and I think high achievers or people that are very goal-oriented see this often. It's a destination versus a journey, right? The destination mindset refers to the notion that we'll be happy once we reach the destination, right? You stare at the end goal and then you are just going to kind of get there and you're just not going to give up, right? Like you have to get to that destination. But what happens is that people that fall into this trap generally are unhappy because they never, even if they've reached the destination, or maybe they never do, right? They're constantly shifting the target. And so there isn't really this idea of like celebration or joy once you reach there, or they're always searching for something, right? Like I will be happy when. The journey mindset, on the other hand, is it's all about enjoying the journey and celebrating your progress and successes along the way. And this is one that consistently comes up with my clients, specifically within the career space, right? What can I learn in this moment? And so again, I will be providing some tips here. With that though, I'd love to hear just in the chat, which mindset trap you find yourself in most often, and maybe even with regard to the situation that we were talking about. Are you seeing in here where you're falling into that trap? And again, sorry, I'm not able to see you all and see the chat with my technology, but are there some that are more common than others, Justice, or is it kind of a diverse range?
We've got a lot of thinking versus doing.
Yes.
Scarcity mindset, destination mindset, scarcity versus abundance, but another thinking versus doing, that's a pretty popular one.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I am so, yes. I'm like, they're so common, all of them, but I completely agree that this idea of thinking versus doing, it often gets in our way. And it's honestly, it's probably like minus I would say the destination versus journey. I see that a lot with my leadership clients. But the thinking versus doing, like that is very evident in regardless of what area of your life, like just feeling like, oh my gosh, like which step would I even possibly take next, right? Like there's so much to do and then I don't even take any action. So very, very common here. And again, I just want to affirm that the good news is it's actually easier to change your mindset than you may think. So what I want to talk about now is, like I mentioned before, the science behind changing your mindset. So let's talk a little bit about that. Shifting our mindset actually means shifting our mindset's neural connections. So when I talk about that, let me give you a simple example. So we all in our brains have a neural connection. We have two we have many, but we have one that says that taking a risk is bad. And then we also have one that says taking a risk equals progress. The neural connection that is stronger is going to be the one that we filter our information through, right? Whenever we encounter a risky situation or decision. This is because the stronger neural connection fires more rapidly and loudly. So the idea here is we need to be able to shift our mindset, right? And actually rebuild the pathway for that neural connection that we want, right? And so we need to activate and strengthen the less dominant mindset neural connection. And as we do this over time, our mindset will essentially shift over time because the new mindset will fire more loudly, right? How we do this, right, is obviously through the exercises and the awareness that I'm sharing with you today, but practicing slowing down and potentially working with a coach if you feel like this is too challenging to solve on your own can be a really great starting point. I bring up the word neuroplasticity here. I'm a big neuroscience nerd and I can go off on tangents about this. I do not know everything about this. There is just so much interesting information. But the bottom line is what this means is that we have the ability to build and alter the pathways of our brain, right? Which is what I'm talking about with these neural connections. What's interesting is that up until, not that long ago, we didn't think that the adult brain was able to do this, but with like new research within neuroscience, which is always shifting, we're finding that like even the adult brain can do this. So that should be hopefully really reassuring to y'all that that shifting our mindsets is actually easier than you think. I'm going to have Justice share a TEDx with you that I'd love you to consider looking. And in this video, they talk about this idea of, the idea that our brains are incredibly plastic, right? Which makes the idea of shifting our mindsets doable. And they talk about this research study where they split a large group of financial professionals in half, and half of the people watched a 3-minute video about how stress is debilitating, and the other half watched a video about how stress is enhancing. And then they did an intervention, basically where they tracked the engagement, performance, and blood pressure of both groups. And what they found is that the group that watched the video that stress is enhancing, they actually had higher engagement, higher performance, and lower blood pressure. So, that's one example, right, of much research and study that has been done around this. But I share this because I'm hoping that in the very least, it is encouraging to you that this can be done and you don't have to let your mindset control the outcomes of your life. Okay, so now how to change your mindset. So here's some steps, right? But the biggest thing that I like to share with my clients when this topic comes up is that it's sort of like learning your ABCs in another language. What I found is that my clients can quickly recognize the trap that they fall into. And if not, of course, you hire a coach. But when you think about the idea of learning your ABCs in another language, like building a new pathway in your brain, or, a new neural connection, shifting your mindset, the science suggests that all it takes is 5 to 20 minutes a day. And in a number of weeks, you will rewire your brain. So this work, kind of another analogy you may think about, is it's sort of like bicep curls for your brain. The more reps you do, the stronger you'll become. And so, it takes time, right? You have to first have the motivation to believe that it's possible. Step 2, right? You hire a coach that can help you recognize this and come up with a plan of how you're going to do this. And then step 3 is really about learning the language, which ultimately is what we're doing today, right? And then it's all about step 4, which is really about practicing, right? Like, again, it takes time. It takes a practice. It is dedicated each and every day. Through mindfulness, through intentionally catching yourself in these moments where you're falling into these traps and changing that story or that narrative that you're telling yourself. But over time, again, through that idea of neuroplasticity of your brain, you can change your mindset. And so, yes, really, really, it really starts with just knowing and having the motivation to believe that it's possible. So as promised, I wanted to tell you exactly how changing mindsets is the spark for positive growth. So we talked about this idea of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. Fixed being more constrained with little room to expand and kind of an unwillingness to get outside of your comfort zone. Whereas the growth mindset being all about potential, we can always learn more, grow more, be better. So a tip here, a simple tip of how you can practice this is reframing. So instead of looking at your setbacks as roadblocks, reframe them as this is something that I can learn from, grow from, and be better from. Okay. So I realized that there are some examples here today that have come up with your setbacks where there's been patterns there, right? Each time, what have you learned from that? Where have you grown? How have you done better in your interview next time, right? Reframing this leads you to more of a growth mindset. Thinking versus doing, which I know was a really, really popular trap that the audience is falling into today. Again, the thinking mindset, just as a reminder, is considering all of the steps that we need to take and then feeling kind of just stuck with where to go from there and not taking any action at all. And then the doing mindset is really being clear about what you want, setting a goal, and taking action. And so the tip that I always offer clients here is you don't have to be ready to take every single step that's on that list. Just pick the smallest action, right? And as you do that, even if that's all you do for today, right? It's going to get you into that doing mode. And oftentimes the anticipation of doing something is much worse than actually doing the thing, right? Like the anxiety behind it. So just pick the smallest step, take action that will get you towards your goal. And then once you get into that doing mode, it inherently makes it easier to take that next step. The abundance mindset, right? The idea of scarcity versus abundance. Again, like I mentioned before, this is a highly complex one. So simply put, as simply as I can simplify this, is in order to shift to a more abundant mindset that is more expansive, open to collaborate, and seeing resources as tools, focus on what you have, right? And create win-win opportunities for yourself, given your current reality, right? See what the possibilities are, right? Use kind of that yes and attitude to your life, and practice gratitude, right? Like literally there is, again, we could talk so much about gratitude and the power of that, right? Be grateful for where you're at and what you do have, and then train your brain to recognize possibilities along the way. The can versus can't, again, this is really, the easiest way to do this is to change the way that we talk to ourselves. Start encouraging ourselves rather than demeaning ourselves, right? Like this all starts with the thoughts and the stories we tell ourselves. Start telling yourself you're great, right? Sometimes that can come in the form of an affirmation for yourself. Sometimes that doesn't work for everyone. But catching yourself in those moments where you're demeaning yourself and actually flip the narrative and say, I'm going to start encouraging myself, because again, the brain will believe what you tell it. And then the journey versus destination, right? The tip here is really enjoy where you are right now, in this moment, in every moment that you're in. Celebrate yourself, take it all in, enjoy the beauty in today. Celebration is part of it. Mindfulness is a huge part of it. Mindfulness does not have to look like an hour of meditation every morning at 5 a.m. You can do anything mindfully. I always tell clients that when this topic comes up. We can be in relationship with people mindfully. We can listen mindfully. We can eat our food mindfully. We can be with our children mindfully. So consider, what that looks like for you, and celebrate and recognize all of the things that you have and the gifts that you have. So for kind of closing here, I wanted to offer these thoughts, and then I also wanted to put a plug in for one of our other coaches who wrote, and Justice will send this to you as well, this incredible blog post about 7 powerful questions to ask yourself today. And so that will come out following the recording of this. I really encourage you all to look at that resource and journal on it as well. Jill has done an amazing job and does an amazing job with really reframing a lot of those thoughts and stories that we tell ourselves. And this is a powerful tool for you that will come in the follow-up. But a couple of things that I just want to highlight here, common stories and thoughts that I hear. I've tried, I've failed. It's just beyond this. Could you ask yourself, could I try a different strategy or approach? I also see I didn't achieve what I set out to do, therefore I failed, right? Could you ask yourself, isn't learning a process? Isn't failure a part of this process? I just wasn't born with it. You could ask yourself, haven't others tried and succeeded through hard work? I can't do it, right? That kind of idea of the can versus can't attitude. Aren't I giving up on myself too soon? Isn't it just a matter of time? Can I do it with repeated effort? And then I don't know if I'll get there ever, right? This idea of kind of all or nothing thinking. Ask yourself, what plan can I make to get there? How can I motivate myself to follow that plan? And what is my first step? So now what I'm going to do is I would like you to go back to that setback. And with this new information awareness that you have, are there any new insights that have come from this? And also, feel free to speak up if you feel called to. I know that that's not for everyone, but Justice, are there any notes in there?
We just got taking some action is better than taking no action. We also
I
just
love
got
that.
acknowledging what you have accomplished, being proud of where you have come from and the resilience you have shown.
Yeah. Oh, I love that idea.
It's a big
The
one.
resilience. Yes, that's huge. And I love that idea of the retrospective too. I often do that with my clients that I've worked with for, at kind of the 3-month and then the 6-month mark, where we'll pause and look back on where they've come. We're coming up to the end of the year, right? Have you looked at everything you've done this year? Another tip that I love to offer is kind of like a daily exercise that you could consider looking at is actually making a to-do list, which is writing down all of the things that you did accomplish today rather than the things that you still need to do tomorrow. So yes, definitely celebration along the way is really important too. Any other thoughts here? And
We
as
have a
I
new insight.
promised, Any new
Sorry.
insights?
Yeah, the brain believes whatever I tell it. I will lean on positive affirmations now when put in this position.
I love that. Yes. Yes.
Every step is a step forward, no matter what. You either learn a lesson or you move towards your goal.
I love this.
Love the
Wonderful.
ta-da list. Huge change in my life.
Yes. I'm glad that that's been helpful for you. All right. Well, continue to think about what those insights are. I'm going to hand it over to Justice to talk a little bit. And then once we've gone through that, I'm going to come off so you can see my face again. And we'll have time for some questions or any more kind of thoughts or reflections around this content.
Thank you so much, Cait. And I really hope everyone's been finding some value in this. But like she said, if you're feeling stuck, if you're experiencing a setback that's just sticking with you, or you find yourself consistently caught in some of these traps and just need some help, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to have a conversation because we have a ton of really great coaches in our team that are more than happy to help you accomplish these goals. Once again, I'm going to drop my link in here for you to put time on my calendar. And then I'm also going to put our website where you can go ahead and read more about us. And on the website, you can also see some of the other coaches that we have. So you can feel free to glance through that as well. But other than that, I guess we can just do the Q&A now, Cait.
Yeah, before we do that, a big part of our business is certainly we do one-on-one coaching, but we do support companies as well. So I would just love to ask the question, if you think your company could benefit from a workshop, please just drop a yes in the chat right now and we will get in touch with you about that because yes, we do. We also offer that as a service as well. And so like, here are some examples of topics that we've covered, right? This list is not all encompassing. Certainly we could do a workshop on mindset for your organization. But a lot of different topics here that we could cover. So if you get that yes in the chat, just let me know and we can kind of follow up with you. Yep. And then Justice also gave you the consult. I am just Cait at ALV Coaching. If this resonated with you and you'd like to get in touch, please email me. And then another shameless plug for two of our wonderful coaches that are doing some sort of more life coaching type events here. We have Jill, who I talked about on the 27th, which is next week. She's gonna be talking about imposter syndrome. And then on November 10th, Kristen is going to be talking about boundaries and how to set them and set healthy ones that stick. So I'm going to stop sharing now and I'm going to come back so I can see. Okay, and I'm back. Okay, so it looks like we got a couple. So from,
yep,
we got a couple of yeses there. Perfect. So I guess with that, we have some time for Q&A or just general thoughts or reflections. Feel free to come off mute or we can continue to monitor the chat. Are there other questions or thoughts that came up for any of you as I shared this content?
Good morning. Hi. Here for the work order? Yes, please come in. Yes. All right, thank you. I've never said. Oh, pretty good. Hello.
Oh. I'm not sure if that might have been an accident. Oh, Danielle, thanks for coming. All right. Well, like I mentioned before, it's much easier than you may think to do this, and you can watch the replay. Justice is going to send out a few of those resources that I touched on. I'd love to get in touch. I love talking about this. As I mentioned before, I am a self-proclaimed people enthusiast. I love connection. I love the one-on-one nature of coaching and really getting inside people's worlds. So reach out to us. We'd love to work with you. I am taking on new clients starting next month, and I think it's a really great time to incorporate coaching into your life, especially as we go into 2022.
Isn't that crazy?
It's so crazy.
Are there any other last minute questions that we have while we have everyone here?
I'm just seeing a lot of thank yous, and hey, you're welcome.
Perfect. Well, I guess with that being said, thank you so much for your time, Cait, and thank you everyone else for being here. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and reach out to us if you need anything from us. We're more than
And
happy to support
Justice,
you.
I want to make sure you got those names for
Yes, I did.
the workshops. Perfect.
Yes, I did. Perfect.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.